أأمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاسبا فستعلمون كيف نذير. Or do you feel secure that the one who is in the heaven, أن يرسل عليكم حاسبا, that he will not unleash from above you and send like a raging storm of stones, of lethal pellets that will rain down on you like hail? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes the rain come down. We experience that. He makes the small hail come down. He makes the big hail come down. And He can rain stones, which He has at times, like on the people of Lut alayhi salam and so on and so. Baked clay pellets came down. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, why do you feel so secure that if you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this will not be your fate? That He will rain on you stones. فَسَتَعْلَمُونَ كَيْفَ نَذِيرٌ. So that finally you come to know by experiencing that of how true was my warning. كَيْفَ نَذِيرِ. It's come nadiri. Nadiri. What kind was my warning? And it can also mean my warner. In other words, take the warnings seriously. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us 2 warnings. In the next ayah, ayah number 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ كَذَّبَ الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِهِمْ فَكَيْفَ كَانَ نَكِيرٌ. And indeed, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning for the kuffar of Makkah, because it's a Meccan surah, and for kuffar of all times, and for all of humanity. وَلَقَدْ كَذَّبَ الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِهِمْ. That your denial of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not unique, because there were indeed people who denied Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before them, before these people, the Quraysh. Allah mentions the past histories of previous nations, that indeed those who came before them also denied Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They denied His revelations. They denied His messengers who came before. They denied His warnings. And they challenged the messengers. They would say, bring on the punishment if you are true. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, then the punishment did come. And it came at His command, and it came on a time frame that He determined, not by their request. فَكَيْفَ كَانَ نَكِيرٌ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then how terrible and how awesome was my destruction, my rejection of them. How I denounced them, how I denigrated them, how I destroyed them, how I disgraced them. Nakir, denied, as if they didn't exist. So the ones who were rejecting the truth became the ones who were rejected. So this ayah also implies that those who were rejecting the message would be subjected to the same or worse punishment and destruction in the dunya, and then what is waiting in the akhirah is even worse. So this is for us also a reminder, because what we see sometimes we get impressed with. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, don't be fooled by those who disobey, who reject the truth. Don't be fooled by their worldly success, by their technological progress, by their military power, by their wealth. Those who reject this message, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can disgrace them and utterly destroy them in 1 second. Everything can change. And we see the tiny examples of this destructive power, the jalal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we experience paralyzing snowstorms, when we see volcanic eruptions, when we see earthquakes, when we see tsunamis, when we see tornadoes, hurricanes. No matter how sophisticated and powerful the nation is, it's brought on its knees. These are tiny, tiny soldiers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, learn from history. History is for learning. That there were nations that were much more powerful, that don't exist, that were destroyed only because they rejected the truth. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. So after looking at the earth and all of these phenomena, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to look up into the heavens and marvel at the birds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الطَّيْرِ فَوْقَهُمْ. Do they not see above them the birds? صَافَّاتٍ وَيَقْبِضْنَ. صَافَّاتٍ means spreading their wings, وَيَقْبِضْنَ, pulling them back. Spreading them and pulling them back. Interestingly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first mentions the spreading, and if we study the mechanics of the birds, they spend more time with their wings spread out than withdrawn. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us that hint. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, do they not see the birds? Now, he just says birds. As some of you might know, when you look at the birds, there are more than 10,000 species of birds. And each one has a different flight pattern, different signature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, look at them and study them. And science tells us that the flapping flight, where you have mobile wings, is much more difficult than fixed wing flights like we have on the airplanes, because the dynamics become unsteady when they are flapping. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, marvel at this. Who keeps them up? Because this is an interesting example, because through the ages and even today, starting from childhood, I don't know if you had the experience, we always wanted to fly. We like to be pilots. We dream. Even in our dreams, sometimes we are flying. Flying has always fascinated man. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, just look at the birds flying. And then he asks the question, who keeps them up? Ma yumsikuhunna illa ar-Rahman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, who yamsikuhunna, who holds them up in the heaven except ar-Rahman. And he uses that this is his mercy, that he holds them up. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just tells us to ponder on this. What does it take to fly? Man, with all of his intelligence, how long it took him to learn to fly, to make things that can fly, and how they fail. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adapted the birds for flight. They were made to fly. So let's look at some of the scientific facts. To be able to fly, you need to be light. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the bones of the birds hollow. And then he covered them with feathers which are light. He did not give them teeth and a nose because they are heavy to chew. So instead of that, he said they will eat these hard things, these grains and these seeds, where they will not chew it, but he put a gizzard in their stomach which will grind it right there. He made them lay eggs so they don't have to carry the baby inside that would make them heavy. And he made their diet tiny but very rich in very high usable energy. Lot of calories in small quantities. He didn't give them bladders to carry urine in them and become heavy. So they excrete as soon as it's produced. And then, so made them light. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made their tails and the wings, the wing bones very small proportionately. And he attached the wing bones in the front to keep the center, because you need to have the center of gravity dead in the center to fly. So for the birds, when they spread their wings, the center of gravity is exactly between the wingtips in the center, and from the tip of their nose to the tip of their tails, that is exactly where the center of gravity is, dead center, so that it makes it easy for them to fly. Every part of the body is adapted to flying. Now birds have lungs. They hold very little air, and they are kept flat against their back ribs. They don't take hold of the chest, because then the center of gravity would move down. But Allah has moved everything else into their chest. And then from those thin little lungs, there are air sacs in the belly, lower part, to keep it light so that the center of gravity is in the right place. And He made their lungs specially efficient to extract oxygens at high level. So when we see birds flying, as Allah tells us to look, you will see some birds flying with their necks stretched out forward, like the cranes. And some of them you will see flying with their necks pulled back, like that. This is like the herons. And why is that? Because just by moving their neck straight forward or back, they make the center of gravity exactly where they should be. Subhanallah. Now, Allah says, look how they fly. We have the big birds, albatross, which has thin, long wings. The albatross can glide and soar for 200 miles for hours without a single beat. On the other hand, we have hummingbirds this size that cannot rest their wings for a second. Do you know what's the frequency of the beating of the hummingbirds? Average 53 beats per second. As high as 80 and sometimes 100 have been recorded per second they are beating. And they're not just beating, it's a figure of 8 like this. And the little bird, their heart rates are at 1263 beats a minute. And these little hummingbirds that are this size, beating at that rate, they cross the Gulf of Mexico to come into Texas and ultimately to Canada. They fly non-stop 500 miles across the Gulf of Mexico in 20 hours. Multiply 20 hours by 60 minutes by 60 seconds and multiply that by 53 beats. No fueling, no stop. Across the ocean they reach, across the Gulf of Mexico. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, look at that. Look at the flight patterns. The woodpeckers swoop down. The crow flies in a straight line. And the swallows dart in every which way they go. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, just look at that. Who holds them up? Who created them? Subhanallah. Lot for us to be humbled with. Illa ar-Rahman. This is ar-Rahman. Innahu bi kulli shay'in basir. And indeed He sees everything. He sees every bird. He sees every butterfly. He sees every insect in the darkness of the night. In the bottom of the ocean, He sees every fish. He sees every creature under the mountains. And of course, He knows everything about the best of His creation, which is al-insan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about His knowledge, about His awareness, so that we become aware of Him. Now we come to ayah number 20. After reflecting on this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي هُوَ جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ يَنْصُرُكُمْ مِنْ دُونِ الرَّحْمَنِ إِنِ الْكَافِرُونَ إِلَّا فِي غُرُورٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks a rhetorical question. The purpose of this question is to remove the delusion of the disbeliever. Because the disbeliever only sees power and wealth and benefit in worldly means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking a question. أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ يَنْصُرُكُمْ. Do you feel safely secure? Which is that army that can come to your help and protect you from Allah and from eternal punishment? Which is the army? أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ. Which is this army for you that can help you? مِن دُونِ الرَّحْمَنِ. Other than ar-Rahman. Again, showing His mercy that in spite of this, Ar-Rahman is inviting you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, look in history. Look at the armies of Pharaoh, what happened to them? They drowned. Look at the armies of Alexander the Great. Gone, small island is left. Look at the armies of Napoleon, gone. Look at the German armies, gone. Look at the Roman legions, gone. Look at the British Empire, gone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, who can sustain you? All of these were given temporary hegemony, the power to dominate and leadership for a period of time by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, come back to Ar-Rahman. Do you have a backup plan? Can anyone protect you? The answer is no. إِنِ الْكَافِرُونَ إِلَّا فِي غُرُورٍ. Indeed, al-kafirun are in ghurur, in delusion. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses kafirun, which is the verb, is the noun, as opposed to man yakfuru, the verb, because the noun is permanent and verb keeps changing. Means kafirun, those who will remain disbelievers. Those who were disbelievers in the past, who persisted, those who will come, not just the Quraysh, but even in the future. The kafirun, they always live in this false reality of just thinking the dunya will do this for them. They are fi ghurur. Ghurur means complete delusion. They're completely deceived. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word al-gharur. Al-gharur means the one who deceives. And Allah uses that for shaitan and his forces and people who are like shaitan, who deceive people. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying the kafirun are fi ghurur. They are immersed. They are fully surrounded in delusion. They are self-deluded. In spite of all of the evidence, all of the favors and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they deny and they are still going off wrong assumptions. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks another rhetorical question. أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي يَرْزُقُكُمْ إِنْ أَمْسَكَ رِزْقَهُ بَلْ لَجُّوا فِي عُتُوٍّ وَنُفُورٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again wants to remove that delusion, the deceit of the disbeliever. Do you feel secure that your rizq, and as we said, rizq is every provision, everything that you need to be sustained to live, whether it's your food, because sometimes we only think rizq means money. It's your food, it's your drink, it's the air that you breathe, it's the shelter, the protection, the clothes, the wealth, the health, the family, the offspring, the companionship, everything that you need is your rizq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي يَرْزُقُكُمْ إِنْ أَمْسَكَ رِزْقَهُ. Who is the one who will provide you in amsaka rizqa, if he withholds it? If he, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, were to withdraw or to withhold from you his rizq, because it all belongs to him, it is sent down from him from the heavens, from the sama. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Zariyat, He says, وَفِي السَّمَاءِ رِزْقُكُمْ وَمَا تُوعَدُونَ. And it's in the heavens. That is your provision. It is there. And that which you were promised. Now what do we see coming down from the rain? We don't see things coming down except things like rain. And rain and rizq have parallels. Because rain itself is a rizq, water. Because water gives life. Without water, there would be no life. But rizq is similar. Rain is unpredictable, your rizq is unpredictable. When the rain is going to come, when your rizq is going to come. Where the rain is going to come, where your rizq is going to come from. And there is no control of the rain with anyone except with Allah. Similarly, there is no control of rizq with anyone except with Allah. So Allah is reminding us by asking this question, who will provide for you rizq if Allah pulls it back?